Those who comprehend the nature of debt either meticulously avoid it or leverage it prudently as a tool, rather than passively drowning beneath its crushing weight. People who understand tangible assets are capable of constructing streams of passive income, thereby liberating themselves from an absolute dependence on wages. And those astute enough to understand inflation proactively safeguard their wealth with real assets, rather than idly watching their savings diminish into oblivion. The system requires you to be financially illiterate because financial ignorance inexorably breeds dependency, and dependency, in turn, confers control. You simply cannot afford to resign from a job you detest if you are perpetually buried under a mountain of debt. You cannot embrace calculated risks or entrepreneurial ventures if you are locked into a cycle of living precariously from one paycheck to the next. You cannot possibly retire with dignity if you possess no understanding of how to build wealth independently of your earned wages. The system, in essence, needs you to be compliant, productive, and permanently trapped. And the most effective, most insidious method to ensure this is to systematically withhold any genuine education on how money truly functions. It is often said that history does not precisely repeat itself, but it certainly echoes. Every grand empire, every intricate economy, every prevailing system of power has invariably relied upon the identical core mechanism. Keep the majority of the populace just sufficiently educated to be productive and functional, yet never educated enough to be truly free. In ancient Rome, the authorities brazenly debased their currency whilst assuring citizens that absolutely nothing had changed. In medieval Europe, monarchs forcibly levied loans upon their subjects, euphemistically labeling it as duty. And in modern America, they relentlessly bury you under layers of debt, ironically presenting it as an opportunity. During the unprecedented challenges of COVID, the Federal Reserve embarked on an unprecedented spree, printing over $4 trillion. This was dubbed quantitative easing, ostensibly a necessary measure to stabilize markets. But let us be unequivocally clear about its actual ramifications. Asset prices across the board exploded. Stock markets soared to unprecedented record highs. Real estate values ascended vertically. Yet, who are the principal owners of these appreciating assets? Not you. The wealthiest 10% of the population command ownership of over 90% of all stocks and possess the lion's share of real estate. So, when the Fed flooded the economy with freshly printed money, it primarily inflated the assets of the already rich, rendering them monumentally wealthier. Simultaneously, your wages stagnated. Your savings account, if you had one, earned a paltry 0.61% interest. And your cost of living, from rent to food to petrol, skyrocketed. Everything became more expensive. This colossal act of money printing effectively salvaged the system for those at the very apex, whilst crushing everyone else beneath the relentless burden of inflation. They are now ensnared, unable to escape this economic reality. This is not a bug or an unintended flaw. It is the deliberate design. The system is inherently structured to concentrate wealth upwards, relentlessly utilizing your labor as its primary fuel. So, the crucial question remains, why were you never taught any of this vital information? Why did you spend countless years in school memorizing historical dates or scientific theorems you would never once apply, yet remain utterly uneducated on the fundamental principles of how money actually works? The answer is unsettlingly simple. Financial literacy poses an existential threat to the established order. Individuals who truly grasp the power of compound interest tend to commence investing strategically in their 20s, ultimately retiring in comfort and wealth. Now, prepare yourself, for this is where the narrative truly darkens. The seismic financial crisis of 2008 should have served as an irrefutable, crystal-clear lesson for everyone on precisely how this intricate system really operates. Financial institutions, driven by avarice and recklessness, engaged in speculative gambles, notoriously bundling toxic, subprime mortgages into complex securities, thereby pushing the global economy to the very precipice of collapse. Yet, who ultimately bore the brunt of this catastrophe? You did. Your home plummeted in value. Your retirement account was slashed by a devastating 40%. Your job security evaporated, or your working hours were drastically cut. All the while, The very banks responsible for instigating this profound crisis were systematically bailed out. Trillions of dollars in taxpayer money, your money, were funneled directly to the same institutions that had engineered the disaster. And what was the outcome? These banks not only survived, but re-emerged larger and more dominant than before. Their CEOs retained their astronomical bonuses. Shareholders saw their investments recover. But for ordinary people, the human cost was immense. Millions lost their homes. Millions lost their livelihoods. Hard-earned savings vanished. Retirements, once within grasp, were cruelly delayed by a decade or more. The overarching lesson was stark and unambiguous. When the system falters, you are forced to absorb the losses. When the system eventually recovers, they are the ones who collect the gargantuan gains. It is a cynical process of privatizing profits while socializing losses. This exploitative pattern has persisted for well over a century, and it shows no inclination towards change, precisely because those who wield power are the primary beneficiaries. And, indeed, it is unfolding once more before our very eyes. Should you attempt to retire during the next inevitable market crash, the outcome will be tragically similar. You will have dedicated 40 years of your life to diligently feeding the system, only for your actual ability to retire to hinge upon capricious forces entirely beyond your personal control. There is a pervasive pattern here, one you absolutely must recognize. Virtually every significant financial decision you've made throughout your life has been meticulously structured and designed to facilitate an upward transfer of your wealth. Your mortgage, for instance, systematically transfers wealth to banking institutions. Your credit cards funnel wealth directly to lenders. Your retirement account channels wealth into the coffers of fund managers. Even your taxes, purportedly for public services, often end up transferring substantial wealth to governments who then expend it on corporate subsidies and bailouts. And let's not forget insurance, be it health, automotive, or home, which represents a recurring monthly transfer of your wealth to companies whose business model profits most handsomely when they are not obligated to pay out. You work 40, 50 arduous hours a week. You have sustained this relentless effort for decades. And yet, inexplicably, you are not wealthy. You are weary. You are stressed. You find yourself constantly questioning whether you will ever genuinely be in a position to retire. This isn't because you have failed. On the contrary, it is because the system has succeeded beyond its wildest dreams. You were never intended to accumulate personal wealth. Your purpose, within this grand design, was to perpetually generate wealth for others, all whilst remaining inextricably dependent on your wages until your dying breath. Now, let's explore inflation, for this represents the insidious, invisible tax that has been silently draining your financial well-being for decades. Let's delve into mortgages, because this is where the financial trap truly becomes vicious. You were assured that purchasing a house represented the quintessential smart investment, an opportunity to build equity, own a tangible asset, and ultimately realize the much-vaunted American dream. So you duly signed a 30-year mortgage agreement. What they conveniently neglected to explain, however, is this stark reality. On a typical 30-year loan carrying, for example, a 6% interest rate, you will end up paying almost double the original purchase price by the time it is finally settled. Then there's your retirement account. That is, if you're fortunate enough to even possess one. You've been consistently advised to contribute to a 401k, to match your employer's contributions, to invest in the market, to let it steadily grow for 3 decades, and then, presumably, to retire in blissful comfort. But here's the crucial information they omit. The vast majority of people have absolutely no genuine understanding of what their money is actually invested in. You might have selected certain funds recommended by your HR department or those boasting impressive recent performance, but you remain largely oblivious to the insidious fees. These are the expense ratios that silently erode 1% or 2% of your hard-earned returns year after year. When compounded over decades, these seemingly minor charges can cumulatively cost you tens of thousands, sometimes even hundreds of thousands of dollars. Money that, by all rights, should have been yours, but is instead quietly siphoned off to enrich fund managers. Furthermore, even if your account does experience growth, your ultimate financial security remains entirely at the mercy of market timing. Imagine planning your retirement for 2008. Your life savings would have been brutally halved precisely when you needed them most. And make no mistake, this was no mere oversight. This was the calculated, meticulously executed plan. Now, let us turn our attention to the tangible outcomes of that carefully laid plan, for you are undoubtedly experiencing its repercussions right this very moment. The 1970s marked a pivotal and fundamental shift within the American economy. Credit cards transitioned from niche products to widespread adoption, and consequently, consumer debt witnessed an unprecedented explosion. Coincidentally, or perhaps not so coincidentally, personal finance classes quietly vanished from school curricula across the nation. This wasn't merely a consequence of budgetary cuts. It was because the economy had unearthed a truly revolutionary insight. A population burdened by debt is, by its very nature, a population easily controlled. To illustrate, in 1975, the typical American household carried virtually no credit card debt whatsoever. Fast forward to today, and Americans collectively own nearly $1 trillion on credit cards alone. The average household now shoulders over $6,000 in revolving credit card debt, incurring punishing interest rates ranging from 16% to 24% on money they have, in essence, already spent. This interest doesn't merely inflict financial pain. It serves as an ironclad guarantee that you will remain perpetually trapped. Each month, a significant portion of your labor is dedicated to settling purchases made years, even decades, ago. The minimum payment merely keeps your head above water, never truly allowing you to achieve freedom. And this state of affairs, it must be emphasized, is something the system absolutely revels in. Banking institutions rake in tens of billions annually purely from this interest, money meticulously siphoned from your hard-earned paycheck, month after month, year after year, for the remainder of your life, if you permit it. But credit cards, alarming as they are, represent merely the tip of the iceberg. In the early 1800s, Prussia pioneered the world's first mandatory education system, not with the benevolent aim of fostering wealth among its citizenry, but with the specific, pragmatic goal of cultivating an obedient workforce and disciplined soldiers. The underlying model was disturbingly straightforward. Impart just enough knowledge for individuals to follow instructions dutifully, yet never enough for them to critically question the overarching system itself. This potent model subsequently migrated to America by the late 1800s, where it was enthusiastically embraced by powerful industrialists. John D. Rockefeller, a titan of industry, famously bankrolled the standardization of American education with one singularly explicit objective: to forge a compliant and reliable workforce, certainly not a populace of independent, critical thinkers. Schools, therefore, diligently taught reading and basic arithmetic, not out of a holistic commitment to intellectual development, but simply because these were essential skills required by the burgeoning factories. Crucially, however, they steadfastly avoided teaching financial literacy. Why? Because an informed populace, financially astute, would inevitably spawn competition. Workers who truly grasped the principles of money might be emboldened to launch their own enterprises. They might collectively demand fair, real wages that truly reflect their value. They might, astonishingly, begin to build their own wealth, rather than merely generating it for the benefit of others. Thus, the educational curriculum was meticulously and deliberately designed. Impart just enough knowledge to render people productive cogs in the economic machine, but never enough to empower them to achieve true financial freedom. By the time you emerged from formal education, you had effectively been conditioned and trained for a lifetime of 40 years of labor, yet 0 years dedicated to the critical art of wealth accumulation. You entered the workforce, diligently climbed the corporate ladder, and saved every penny you could. Yet, despite all this effort, it somehow never quite feels sufficient. Your salary increases consistently fail to keep pace with soaring prices. Your meticulously planned retirement account doesn't accrue wealth at the rate you were promised. And that house you purchased, once heralded as a sound investment, increasingly feels like a financial anchor, weighing you down. Every financial advisor, every banking institution, every supposed expert offers the same tired refrain. You should have started earlier. You should have saved more. You should have invested differently. But here's the inconvenient truth that absolutely nobody dares to tell you. The system itself was never conceived with your victory in mind. Instead, it was cunningly engineered to perpetually keep you working, spending, borrowing, and ultimately, trapped. The profound reason you were never educated on the true workings of money is precisely because individuals who genuinely comprehend finance do not remain perpetually dependent on wages. They don't shoulder crippling debt for 3 decades, nor do they face a penniless retirement after 4 decades of strenuous labor. Financial ignorance, it must be stated unequivocally, is not some accidental byproduct of society. Rather, it is the very bedrock upon which an economy predicated on your labor and your indebtedness has been meticulously constructed. To truly grasp why you find yourself struggling despite meticulously adhering to all the rules, we must journey back to the genesis of this very system. Many erroneously believe that the modern economy emerged organically, a natural evolution of societal progress, but this is far from the truth. Back in 2019, a particular study posed a remarkably straightforward question to a sample of American adults. If you were to invest $1,000 at a 5% annual interest rate, how much would you possess after a 5-year period? Astonishingly, fewer than 30% of respondents managed to provide the correct answer. It's crucial to note that the participants were not adolescents, but rather established, working adults. These are individuals grappling with mortgages, car repayments, and retirement accounts whose mechanisms they fundamentally misunderstand. They are people who have diligently earned money for decades, yet were never truly taught the foundational principles of how it actually operates. Indeed, that very same year, these selfsame adults collectively bore the burden of over $14 trillion in personal debt. We're talking about credit cards pushed to their limits, mortgages underwater, meaning the debt exceeds the property's value, and retirement plans so insufficient they wouldn't cover even a decade of basic living expenses. Ironically, every single one of these individuals could probably articulate that the mitochondrion is the powerhouse of the cell, a scientific fact they memorized 4 decades ago, and will, in all likelihood, never practically apply. Yet, tragically, none of them were ever instructed in the one discipline that held the potential to transform their entire existence. Understanding how money truly functions, and by extension, comprehending why they are destined to toil until their dying day, whilst others accumulate vast wealth. This critical omission was not merely an educational oversight or an unfortunate accident. On the contrary, this was the system performing precisely as it was engineered to do. Consider your own journey. You've been working tirelessly for decades. You've meticulously paid your taxes, diligently met your financial obligations, and generally followed every instruction laid out before you. Different eras, different guises, yet the underlying deception remains tragically the same. The objective is consistent: perpetually transfer wealth upwards, maintain the general population in a state of dependency, and, above all, ensure they never truly comprehend the machinations unfolding around them. You are not taught about money precisely because individuals who truly understand money do not remain ensnared within the system. And the system, by its very design, needs you to be trapped. This is not some elaborate conspiracy theory. This is fundamental economics in action. If this perspective has offered you a fresh insight, please consider hitting the subscribe button. History holds the answers, and I aim to illuminate where to find them.